right, so those are some of the faces of Occupy Wall Street. And for more than 2 weeks, we've been showing you pictures from the front lines of this movement as well. Perhaps some of the strongest pictures we showed you are from over the weekend. Video of more than 700 people getting arrested on the Brooklyn Bridge. Now, as far as the latest in Lower Manhattan, a lot of today has been spent preparing for what is expected to be a major day tomorrow, with labor groups announcing that they too will join the protests. Also, I'm hearing rumors of a nationwide student walkout set for noon tomorrow. But this evening, well-known economists will be speaking at the Occupy Wall Street protests, and that is Richard Wolff, host of Economic Update on WBAI 99.5 radio. But before he runs off there, he's going to spend a few minutes with us here talking about the protest, the problems, and so much more. Hey there, Richard. You and so many others have called this a historic movement. What are you seeing there, and what is your hope? What do you hope to inspire in your talk later this afternoon?
Well, and partly what I'm going to try to do is to make these young people and the older people with them aware that it really is historic. They are expressing something that's been building in the United States for 30 years, if not longer. A country that was once relatively equal in its distribution of wealth and income has become much more unequal. And with it has gone a destruction of our environment, a corruption of our politics. And what you're seeing now is a culmination of a buildup of a long time. That's why it's here, that's why it's staying, and I want them to feel the full force of the legitimacy of what they're doing, and the desire to change this country echoes in the minds of a clear majority of this country's people.
I think it's an important point that you bring up, and I do want to take this a little broader. I'll take this straight from something that you wrote about your talk that you're giving today, that, so many people take such pride in questioning, challenging, and criticizing things like healthcare, education, and transportation, yet we have failed to similarly question, challenge, or criticize our economic system, otherwise known as capitalism. I'm wondering why you think this subject has been so off limits.
Well, we take a justifiable pride in questioning our institutions as a way to make them better. We should have been doing that for the last 50 years with our economic system. This is not its first failure. This is not its first crisis. But because of the Cold War, it became impossible to question the economic system. You either had to be a cheerleader or a celebrator of this system, or you were considered somehow traitorous or disloyal. And all that happened was that capitalism got a free pass. It could degenerate the way it has into the kind of corruption and the kind of inequality and injustice we're now seeing being protested. So I think what these young people are doing and what the older folks with them are saying is, it's time to get back and do what reasonable people ought to do. Question their economic system, capitalism, see if it needs to be changed, see if we can do better, and then move in that direction. And no longer allow the voices of repression and conservatism to prevent us from making this a society that's better equipped to meet our needs than is now the case.
So you just said, Richard, that you blame, in part, the Cold War for this sort of change in dynamic. I know that whenever capitalism is criticized, the cries of socialism often follow. The word socialist still, in so many ways, a bad word. I'm wondering if you have an idea, how does this message war shift, at least in terms of talking about capitalism in a way that really weighs all parts of it?
Well, I think that what you have is a kind of knee-jerk reaction. It is not working very well. The more I go around the country, the more I see that the cry of socialism kind of falls on deaf ears. For the older people, they've heard it so often, they know that it's just rhetoric. For the younger people, they are led to ask the question, if socialism is the big, scary alternative to capitalism, and if capitalism is not delivering the goods, then maybe I ought to learn a little bit more about this socialism, and maybe I ought to ask some questions. So the irony is the conservatives screaming socialism are actually feeding a growing interest in what socialism is, and then leading to the discovery that there are as many varieties of socialism as ever there were of capitalism, and dismissing all of them is a sign of ignorance and not a sign of an intellectual activity and openness to trying to make the world better.
I mean, I think that might be true, Richard, in terms of the vast majority of level-headed people saying, you know, maybe I do need to understand socialism versus capitalism versus communism. Who knows? But however, it's still, when you turn on a lot of the mainstream media, they have their talking points, they have their short sound bites, and still socialism is seen as such a bad word.
Yes, but again, I am really quite confident that that is fading in the United States. The more and more the system we actually have is clearly not working for the majority of people. The more they will associate all of the arguments why to keep it nonetheless, to not question it, those are going to be more and more thin and more questioned. That's already happening. That's why this rally got going. That's why it's growing. That's why it endures despite the media relationship to it, the police relationship to it. This is the buildup of a generation of people who realize that they should look for alternatives to capitalism. Socialism is one of those. That's worthy of their attention. I don't think a lot of bad-mouthing is going to change the impact of the real world on people's consciousness.
You know, let's get back to those protesters, Richard. I know one of the major themes of Occupy Wall Street is this inequality gap continuing to grow. Those big banks and Wall Street bankers sitting on top of growing profits, and everyone else sort of, you know, watching their savings accounts dwindle down to nothing. What do you think are some of the strategies being proposed to deal with this down in Lower Manhattan? We showed you before some of the people who worry that they're just being seen as hippies in the streets. But what are some of the real ideas here that are taking shape?
It's a very rich stew. One of the marvels of a genuine social movement, as opposed to one manufactured in an advertising office, is that a genuine social movement is messy, complicated, brings in very diverse people who all have ideas. But let me assure you that the ideas coming out of Wall Street are very good. As an economist, a professional, I can assure you of that. They want to change, for example, the tax system, so that people at the top do not get away with paying few or low taxes, something that has been in the news, and they have some very concrete proposals to go back to what the tax rates were in the 1950s and 60s, which turns out to be much more equal than they are today. That's a very concrete proposal. Some of them have worked it out in considerable detail. They have proposals also to change how the businesses of America are run, that if you want a society that works equally, then the businesses have to be run, not by a handful of people at the top, big shareholders, boards of directors, but in a democratic way, by all the people who work there and by the people in the communities that interdepend with these companies. They have proposals for a democratization of the workplace, something that I talk to them about a great deal, and that there's a lot of interest in that. So there are both older and newer original proposals. I think you'll see them worked out in the weeks to come to a very good program, but not one hatched in the brains of this or that expert, one that comes out of a diverse social movement in the early phases of its birth. It's an amazing and important social historical event to watch and to be part of.
And just last question for you, Richard, I know you have to run. We talk about some of these people who have real power. Certainly the power is in the people on the streets, but there are also people, higher up people, making decisions with their hand on the buttons. I think about Chairman of the Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke. He was recently questioned about these Occupy Wall Street protests, and here's what he said. He said, "I take unemployment growth and inflation into account, not protests." Just a quick reaction from you to that comment.
In my entire life, and you can tell from my hair I've been around a while, in my entire life, the people in power always begin in reacting to social movements by insisting that they don't matter, that they have no influence. That's not correct, but it is a good effort to dissuade and to discourage the people that are gathering there. The people at the top are paying very close attention. I can assure you from personal experience, the leading bankers, the leading corporate executives are very worried that this is the beginning of a mass movement that will change American politics and influence the bottom line of their companies. When you hear them say things like that, that's purely a PR effort to discourage such a movement. I don't think it's succeeded the first 3 weeks. I don't think it will succeed in the future. That's all it is.
An important point, this movement seems to be getting larger, not smaller. Richard Wolff, economist and host of Economic Update on WBAI 99.5 FM radio. Thanks so much.